All right, so in this video, I just want to share 3 reasons why genuine change and transformation can be so difficult for us as humans. And the first is that we tend to pretty much always hear new information within the context of what we already know. But what we already know is probably incorrect or ineffective, so then that would by default stain the new information and undermine if its efficacy. And then it might sound weird of like, well, no, what I know isn't already incorrect or ineffective. But if you think about if you're trying to learn something new or you're in the context of self-help or spirituality or personal development, then your presupposition is that in some way you need to be better, or in some way you are less than, or in some way you're actually not effective. Because if you were already effective, you were already great, you were already at 100%, then why would you need to improve, or why would you need to seek something higher? Why would you need to seek something greater? Or why would you need to develop more at the end of the day? So basically, that's just built within the language and the presupposition of what we're trying to do. So then so for example, let's say we're really depressed, we're really anxious, and, our relationships are terrible and we're just not in a good place in our life. So that's going to be the position from which we try to filter and hear new information, which, of course, that can be useful and that can help move us out of a certain place. But more often than not, it just creates another version of the same thing because we're trying to understand that new information within the context of whatever it is that we already know. And if we talk about anything related to internal arts or meditation or spirituality, it's way worse, way worse than even that example, because it's like if there's a person who is functioning at the absolute pinnacle of what a human possibly can, there's pretty much no way myself or probably anyone watching this video can completely relate to or understand what they're saying, because it's kind of like saying, can I relate to the reality of a blue whale? Probably not, because we are not the same. So anyways, that's the first point. The second is that oftentimes when encountering new information, there's a risk of losing our identity or having a perceived loss or threat to our identity, which is oftentimes called taking things personally, or reacting negatively to information. And if you're not sure about that, go look at YouTube comments on like pretty much any video. But basically, there's an aspect of our identity that just wants to be confirmed and validated, for better or worse. Meaning, like, if you're already really stressed, you're probably just going to want more situations and events and substances to keep you feeling stressed. Like, if you're already really depressed, odds are many things in your life are set up to basically keep you feeling that way because they were created and orchestrated and came to be out of that place. And anything that will take us out of it, some part of ourselves will perceive that as a threat, and that will feel like a loss. And then eventually we won't want to do that, because the number one thing our identity wants to do is kind of like be preserved, be confirmed, be validated, be strengthened, be boosted, not negated, not removed, not minimized, not diminished in any way, shape, or form. So when it comes to new information, new concept about an idea, a new way of looking at something, if it comes across as immediately comfortable and immediately, oh yeah, that just hits, the odds are it's just probably validating what we already think and feel. It's just supporting what we already think and feel. And oftentimes it might not even be what that person intends, what they mean implicitly or explicitly, or even what they even say. Because the mechanisms I'm talking about here are what we would call filters or biases. And it's almost like a game of telephone, where like you literally say something, but then you hear what the next person says, and it's like, I didn't say that. I didn't use those words. I didn't use that tonation. I didn't imply that. I didn't explicitly state that. So I don't know what you were hearing, and it's completely different. And, if you're a human being that's been on the earth and had any adult relationships or any adult interactions, or I guess even as kids, you can just maybe reflect for 15 seconds and probably find a lot of instances where what you were saying and what you meant was completely misconstrued. But here's where it gets interesting, is you can do the exact same thing to yourself. Meaning you can be just as confused, just as out of touch with what you're actually trying to communicate, what you're actually trying to say, or what you actually think and feel that is motivating that thing. There's people, and it's very common for us as humans to be just as confused. So if you think about that, if we just zoom out and say this person's really quite confused with what's even really going on with them, and they're trying to talk to this other person over here that's really quite confused and out of touch with even what's going on with them. They have no real clarity or discernment or stability within their mental faculties, and then these two people are going to try and communicate. There's just a recipe for uh, for conflict or complete misunderstanding or just complete projection or complete I don't know, narcissism, I guess, on a complete extreme. Which leads me to the third and final example, which is people will try and exert willpower and mental tension on top of mental tension. So what I mean is, like, for example, I've noticed a lot of spiritual people, self-help people, and people in really personal development are some of the most disingenuous and confused people that I've ever met because of what I'm talking about. So what I mean is, like, I can think of a lot of people. I could just go on Instagram right now and probably find dozens where I could find someone, they're posting all about how happy they are and how great their life is and how meditation is, really changed their life. But when I listen to their voice and I look at them and I see their mannerisms and the way their eyes move and their face moves and their body, that's not the reality of their nervous system. The reality of their nervous system is something completely different than what they are mentally thinking that they are living in. Because again, it goes back to the presupposition, the idea that you're engaged in these endeavors is implying that in some way you're inadequate or in some way you could be better, or in some way you need to be improved. So it's almost kind of like a slightly self-defeating process in some capacity. And again, I'm not knocking or putting down those things in any way, shape, or form, because they help a lot of people, they improve lives, and they add value. They've helped mine. So again, I'm just pointing out one specific dynamic and process that I've seen quite a lot over the years, just, from being in the industry for 15 years, more or less. So basically putting mental tension on top of mental tension, basically being like, I don't know, I would say I'm really stressed and anxious, but then I'm really into Buddhism or meditation or spirituality or whatever in some capacity or form. So I feel like I should have an external veneer or facade of being calm and centered and grounded and, aware of what I'm feeling. So I'm actually feeling something, but I try to pretend and act like I'm a different thing. So it's basically a group of people trying to be different than what they are, trying to feel different than what they feel, and be something else entirely than what is actually necessarily genuinely occurring for them, which I guess we could call disassociation in a kind of a colloquial term. But basically, if you're already like quite mentally tense, and then because that's what because that's your frame of reference, because that's your mode of existing, you're usually just going to put more mental tension on top of it, which is kind of the opposite direction you want to go. It's not comfortable. It's not healthy. It's just tension on top of tension. It's just like if I squeeze my bicep, which is, obviously not very big because I don't lift weights or anything, but if I just squeeze it and it starts to cramp, and I think the solution is to squeeze it harder, that's obviously not sustainable and doesn't make sense in any way, shape, or form. But if I let that tension go, my mind will perceive that as scary. My mind will perceive that as weaker. My mind will perceive that as a threat or a loss of identity, or it will feel weak because it's used to being contracted, and that appears to feel strong. So when I let it go and release it, it feels weak. So the mind feels, oh, this is a loss, and oh, we're not going in where we want to go, and we're losing our sense of self. But in reality, it's actually healthier because the muscles relax and it's not cramping. It's just we're not exerting the mental tension on top of what was already tension. If that makes sense to basically illustrate the point of what I'm saying, it's kind of like saying, I'm not clenching my biceps. I'm not contracting my muscles chronically. I'm not doing that at all. And then that's kind of what people are doing. And then someone says, actually, if you, want to let go and move your arms and relax them, you're going to do X, Y, and Z. And you're going to be like, well, no, because within the context of my arm being contracted, you're telling me it needs to move, but I can't really move it that well because it's contracted. So what you're saying is wrong, because this feels very strong to me and this makes me feel empowered and validated. So what you're saying is wrong. And this is oftentimes how we as humans try to understand new ideas, new information, especially as it relates to anything self-help or trying to improve ourselves, because anything that genuinely improves ourselves is probably uncomfortable. If you're out of shape and you run, it doesn't feel good. If you're out of shape and you lift weights, it doesn't feel good. What feels good is doing exactly the same thing you've been doing, which has been producing the same results that you are saying you want to get out of. But by saying you want to get out of them, you're saying you're going to keep doing the same thing, when in reality, the thing you're doing is what led to the result. So it doesn't make any sense at all. And it's kind of a contradiction of terms. And that's more or less what I've been trying to say and get at for the last 10 minutes. So hopefully that helps. And I'll talk to you soon.